Same-sex marriage is a topic that still tends to be controversial today. This world we all share is filled with war, disease, hate, and poverty, and in such a place, love overcomes hate and shines through as a positive action, yet there are still some who believe there should be restrictions on who should be able to love who. The act of legalizing same-sex marriage was a battle that took years to conquer before the Supreme Court ruled that marriage equality is legal in all 50 states under the 14th Amendment. The Supreme Court case of Obergefell v. Hodges was brought to court on April 28, 2015, finally legalizing same-sex marriage in all 50 states on June 26, 2015. Obergefell v. Hodges was a series of lawsuits from 14 same-sex couples and 2 men whose same-sex partners had passed away. The petitioners filed suits in federal district courts in their home states, claiming the respondent state officials violate the 14th Amendment by denying them the right to marry or to have marriages lawfully performed in another state given full recognition. The petitioners were from Michigan, Kentucky, Ohio, and Tennessee. These states define marriage as a union between one man and one woman. States including Arkansas, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Texas were also states with same-sex marriage bans prior to the Supreme Court ruling of Obergefell v. Hodges. However, on June 26, 2015, the Supreme Court ruled that all 50 states must license a marriage between 2 same-sex people. Although same-sex marriage has been legalized for almost a year and a half, it is still not completely accepted by everyone. I sat down with Professor Cale Keegan to get an inside view on commonly asked questions regarding secularism and same-sex marriage. People who identify themselves as religious have a tendency to be more likely against gay marriage than those who identify themselves as non-religious. Does this statement seem accurate, that the tendency for Christians to be less likely to support same-sex marriage than those who are non-religious?
Well, there's a couple things going on in that question. The first is that in the U.S., particularly, I think when we hear the word religious, we tend to think Christian automatically.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure whether all religious people are opposed to marriage equality. I think there's a question. So, for example, American Buddhists are pretty, don't really have like a strong stance on marriage equality. They're much less concerned with LGBT issues, right? Some sects of American Buddhism have been performing gay marriages for like 20 years at this point. So I think, we have to be careful when we say religious to think about what we mean by that. Do we really just mean Christians? Do we really just mean evangelical Christianity? Because that's often how the term gets shorthanded, is like, right? Like Christians, because we're a majority Christian nation, Christians like to think that they get to define what religion means, when really there's no actual settled religious doctrine about this, like across all religions, and religions don't agree about it. I would say, that the most vocal Christians in the country, which would be the more conservative wings of most of the mainline Christian denominations, do seem to kind of actively, maybe not encourage active discrimination, but do kind of look down on, right, marriage equality, like thinking maybe it's not an ideal situation, or, right,
Right.
But there are other types of Christians, right? So Christianity is very diverse as well.
Right.
It's just that those groups are not like the groups in power, the groups in charge of the discussion.
Okay, my second question is, people who support same-sex marriage have often said that love is love and it should not matter what sex they are. Is it viewed as discriminatory for same-sex marriage to be illegal, banned, or frowned upon?
Well, yeah, I'd say. One of the issues in the U.S. is that, we have these groups of people who are considered protected classes of citizens. So, ethnic minorities, people with disabilities, right? These are women, are these. There have been rulings saying like this group of people is discriminated against because of, it's usually because of like innate characteristics that they can't control, so we're going to give them special oversight in the law. Now, we do not have a law like that for LGBTQ people yet. So there's no legal precedent, there's no federal legal precedent for like protecting people. So you can say it's discriminatory, But according to what? Is it discriminatory according to federal law? Not necessarily, but it is, you know, kind of not really up to the standards of a pluralist society.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So it depends on how you're defining discrimination.
Some say that marriage is strictly for procreation, yet it is still legal for couples to marry who have no intention of having children or are unable to. What would be a good definition for marriage then? And then kind of going off of that, do you think it's a production of the church where it's seen as a religious act, or is it a production of the state?
I think most people get married because due to the way the state values marriage and the way the state defines marriage. So I think if there were no legal benefits to marriage, far fewer people would actually get married. You know, it's in our society, it's supposed to primarily be a state institution. And certainly not just for the purposes of procreation. I mean, people have been procreating forever. That's how we got here, right?
Yeah.
And the modern form of marriage that we currently have now is only about 200 years old at most, right? It's a very modern conception of how families are supposed to run. So people who say it's for procreation, well, they're kind of playing fast and loose with history. And the state has no mandate about that. Like, can you imagine if when you got married, they were like, okay, now you have to procreate?
Right.
Fewer people would get married if that was the rule, I think, because people want to run their own, you know, family planning. They don't want to be told what to do by the state.
It has been stated that same-sex marriage can be viewed in a positive light because adoption rates will increase. Do you think there are any other benefits that would come from same-sex marriage?
Just generally treating people fairly. You know, like, if people have rights, they have rights. You can't really, I mean, the Supreme Court has said this, right? You can't, there's no actual rational reason why those rights should not be granted to same-gender couples. They're really, the only objections tend to be religiously moral in nature, and the state is not supposed to defend any one religion's moral point of view. So that, clearly, that kind of reasoning did not hold up, and that's why the Supreme Court, you know, gave us marriage equality. I think marriage equality also tends to help provide stability in society. States that have enacted same-sex marriage, and you know now will look federally too, tend to have better marriage rates for both, for everybody, because that means that gay people aren't getting married to straight people and then getting divorced when it doesn't work. So there are real social benefits to this, I would say.
Many people feel the responsibility to protect their children and offer them the best they can as a parent. However, parents who do not support same-sex marriage often see it as their responsibility to protect their children from seeing, hearing, being taught the act of same-sex marriage and homosexuality in general. Should same-sex marriage be mentioned in schools?
People tend to forget that most LGBTQ kids grow up in families that are fundamentally unlike them. Like, they don't get that information from their families. They have to get it elsewhere. So we're doing people a real disservice by not teaching them about the full spectrum of identities, because either they don't learn how to, you know, they're not challenged to think about diversity at a young age, right? And then also, young LGBTQ people are not getting any kind of information, representation. So it's bad on both sides, I would say.
And then, do you think there is any real solution to end the controversy over same-sex marriage?
It doesn't look like we're going to have a reversal of that ruling anytime soon, regardless of, it's not going to be the thing that this new administration goes after. White, middle-class, gay and lesbian people are the most privileged and powerful group inside of the LGBTQ community, and I doubt very much that the Trump administration is going to try to reverse those rights.
Well, my solution would be that America is seen as like a place to be diverse and like everything, so it should be more accepting and try to see like both sides, because I think a lot of people are like uninformed, like they don't even know, they just go with like what other people hear or say, and they're like, yeah, I totally agree, when they're not really well informed.
Absolutely, and you know, the number one thing that changes people's minds is just like getting to know a gay person and being like, oh, like you're not really a monster, you're a person.
Right.
You know, so that, you know, as soon as, I think we get too caught up in the, like the political thinking, and we don't really see people as human. Once we do, it gets a lot harder to sustain that discomfort kind of goes down.
You're not going to solve anything if you're not going to talk about it.
In fact, I think not talking about it gives permission to people who want to hurt other people, right? So if you look at other instances of like when crackdowns come and people are like, well, it just makes me uncomfortable, so I'm not going to stand up for people because they're not necessarily like me. That's how a society gets divided up, and you know, it's dangerous to like not speak up when you think something might be wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for sitting down with me.
Absolutely.
Professor Keegan stated that same-sex couples are not harming anybody. A commonly presupposed idea is that children raised by parents of the same sex are not provided with the proper balance and are less likely to thrive in their lives. However, multiple research studies have shown that children raised by same-sex parents have no different developmental outcomes than those raised by heterosexual parents. No matter who likes who or why people are the way that they are, this earth has 7 billion people in it, and it takes all different types of people to make the world go round. So instead of labeling people as gay, bisexual, transgender, or lesbian, we need to start viewing ourselves as human. To label and define is to limit, and there is so much more to a person than just their sexual orientation. America is a land of freedom and diversity, and it is important that people remember we are all simply human and to be more accepting of each other.
America the brave still fears what we don't know. And when everyone else is more comfortable remaining voiceless rather than fighting for humans that have had their rights stolen. I might not be the same, but that's not important. No freedom till we're equal. Damn right I support it.